One of my commenters in the previous video for the mystery device that I figured was some kind of a device that was designed for the blind to tune up their radio transmitters if they were ham radio operators in the 1920s. One of the commenters, he suggested that maybe this device, because it's got a diode in it, if a high voltage was applied to what I thought was a headphone jack, if a high voltage was applied here, maybe this would go into would oscillate. And then the signal could be taken off here and fed into a receiver or used for various purposes as a broadband noise source. So I think I will see how much validity there is to that suggestion, and I'll put a high voltage 0 to 450 volts across here. And incidentally, both these resistors are marked, and they are very close in value. They haven't drifted. So I'm going to put a high voltage across here, positive and negative, and then turn it around negative and positive and see what happens. I'll put a scope right here and see if I can see any kind of signal at all. Here we have the high voltage being applied to here and here, right across what looks like an earphone, an old-fashioned phone jack here, socket. And I'm going to take, here I've got a scope probe across these 2 points here, which corresponds with these 2 points here, here and here. Now I'll turn on the scope, and here's the high voltage power supply. It goes from 0 to 450 volts. And I'm going to apply it across that earphone jack. So I will look on the scope and see, I'll go from 0 to 450 volts, and I'll see if I get any noise or sign of any signal on the scope. Okay, there I've turned on the high voltage, and I've gone up to 450 volts. And I'm getting absolutely nothing. I've now switched the polarity, and I'll have a look at if I get anything on the scope again as I raise the voltage. Absolutely nothing. So that doesn't seem to affect the tube or anything. There's no current flow, and I even apply 450 volts. So now I'm going to see what the breakdown voltage of the tube is. This tube is a full wave rectifier. So I've put the negative terminal on the cathode, on one of the cathodes, and the positive terminal on the anode. So let's see what happens. Here we have the tube hooked up in the mode that it conducts in. I thought, looking at the schematic, that this was a full wave rectifier, but this particular tube only acts as a half wave rectifier, because it only works in this mode here, with the positive connected to the far left thick terminal and the black connected to the far left thin terminal. So the other 2 pins either aren't connected, or that half of the tube is not working. So anyway, I'm going to hook this up to the high voltage power supply, and I'm going to see what voltage that this tube conducts at, what it ionizes at. It's a helium-filled tube. So here I turned the high voltage on, and I'm going to gradually turn up the voltage, and look at the left-hand milliamp scale. It'll shoot up, and make note of there. It was just under 300 volts. Now, let's do it again. And I'm going to drop down the voltage and see at what voltage. There we are. And then we go down, and it stops conducting somewhere around 100 volts. So it starts conducting at 300 and drops down to 125 or so, maybe 100, and then we go down, and it stops conducting when I go down below 125 and 100. When I reverse them, I get a little bit of current flow, but almost nothing, but it doesn't have any breakdown. So it acts as a true diode. Just with that short period of conduction at about 200 milliamps or a little higher, the tube is quite warm. So I think that tube might be quite easy to blow if you abuse it. Not blow, but it would cease to operate if overheated. So considering it's almost 100 years old, I'll just be very careful with this tube. Here I've put the tube back in the device, and after doing those tests, I think I can conclude that this device wasn't a noise source, at least up to 450 volts. So it leaves it up to the imagination what this device was. Any other suggestions are more than welcome. I'm very interested to know what people think that this device could be.